Years ago, I had no money, no food, and not a single word of English. Today, I teach English to hundreds of students. This is the story of how God's bigger plan changed my life forever. Life can sometimes feel impossible. There are days when you feel stuck, when your dreams look too far away, and when people tell you to give up. I know this feeling very well because I lived through it myself. But I also know that change is possible, and that a bigger plan can exist even in the darkest times. In this video, I want to take you on a journey through my struggles, my tears, and my faith. It is not just about learning English, but about learning how to believe in yourself and to never give up. You will hear how I moved from zero to a place of hope, and how every step of the way, I discovered that God had something greater waiting for me. So sit with me, listen closely, and let my story remind you of something powerful: your life is not finished yet. No matter how hard things are, there is still a way forward. This is Easy English Official, and today I will share my true story with you. Chapter 1: My Struggles. My life began in a very difficult place. Every day was heavy with worry because I did not have enough money even for the simplest needs. Sometimes I went to sleep hungry, and sometimes I woke up wondering how I would survive the next day. In those moments, my dream felt so far away, almost impossible to reach. English was a language I could not speak at all. I remember hearing people talk, but the words sounded like music I could not understand. I wanted so much to join in, to express myself, to feel like I belonged. But every time I tried, my mouth froze and my mind felt empty. It was like standing outside a window, watching life move on without me. People around me did not believe in my dream. They said learning English was too hard, especially for someone like me with no resources. They laughed when I tried to practice and told me I should give up. Their words cut deep into my heart, and for many nights I cried quietly, wondering if they were right. Still, a small voice inside whispered, "Keep going." The struggle was not only about language. It was about survival. With no money for books or teachers, I felt locked out from the tools others had. Sometimes I borrowed old, torn pages that other students threw away. I copied every word, holding on to them like treasure. I told myself that even if my tools were broken, my dream was still whole. Each day became a battle of choices. Should I search for food or study English? Should I rest my tired body or force myself to keep reading? Many times, I chose the harder path. I went hungry so I could spend more hours practicing. I stayed awake long after midnight, whispering words into the silence, determined to make them mine. There were moments when sadness felt heavier than hope. My clothes were worn out, my stomach empty, and my future unclear. Yet inside me burned a fire that even pain could not put out. I wanted to speak, to connect, to rise above my struggles. That desire gave me the strength to open my eyes each morning and keep moving forward. I often walked past schools where students had real classes. I watched through the windows, jealous of their books and their teachers. I stood there like a stranger, wondering why my life was so different. But instead of turning away, I made a promise to myself: one day, I would not just be a student in a class, I would lead one. The path was lonely. Friends drifted away because they could not understand why I was obsessed with learning. They wanted fun, laughter, and escape. I wanted discipline, focus, and growth. Their absence made me feel abandoned, but in that silence, I discovered something important. My own inner voice became stronger. Sometimes I thought about giving up. I imagined what it would feel like to stop struggling, to stop fighting for something that seemed so far away. But every time I thought of quitting, I saw my future self standing tall, speaking English, teaching others. That vision pulled me back onto the path, no matter how painful the journey became. The nights were the hardest. Darkness made my problems feel bigger, and loneliness pressed down on me. Yet those were also the moments when I practiced most. I whispered English words into the night, as if the stars themselves were listening. I told myself that every sound I spoke was a seed, and one day those seeds would bloom into a new life. Even when people mocked me, I tried to listen less to their voices and more to the quiet hope inside me. They said, "You cannot do it." But my heart replied, "Watch me." Their doubt gave me fuel. I turned their laughter into energy, pushing myself harder than ever before. There were times when my body wanted to collapse, but my dream lifted me. Hunger made me weak, but hope made me strong. When my stomach was empty, I filled my mind with words. When my hands shook from exhaustion, I steadied them by writing just one more line, one more phrase, one more sentence. Each small step felt like climbing a mountain. One word learned was a stone placed higher on the path. One phrase remembered was a rope pulling me upward. The progress was slow, but with every new word, I felt a little closer to freedom. English was no longer just a language, it became my lifeline. The more I studied, the more I realized that my journey was not only about learning English. It was about becoming stronger inside. Each obstacle was shaping me, teaching me patience, courage, and resilience. The world tried to break me, but in my struggle, I was building a new version of myself. I had nothing but a dream. No money, no food, no guidance, just a dream and the belief that God had not forgotten me. I told myself over and over, maybe the plan is bigger than I can see right now. Maybe this pain has a purpose. Maybe one day, I will look back and say, it was worth it. Chapter 2, The Fight to Learn. I woke up every morning with one thought in my mind, I must study. Even when my body begged me to rest, my heart told me to rise. The world outside was harsh and cold, but inside my little room, I carried a fire that could not be put out. That fire was my dream to master English. Each day felt like climbing a hill with heavy stones on my back. Without books, without a teacher, and without proper guidance, I had to create my own path. I repeated words again and again until they stuck in my memory. I wrote them on scraps of paper, sometimes even on old newspapers, refusing to let my situation stop me. Morning hours were my favorite. While others slept, I whispered English words to myself. The sun rose slowly, and with it, my hope. I felt like each sunrise was God telling me, here is another chance. Use it well. Those quiet hours became my secret weapon, my hidden strength. At night, the world was silent, and I studied harder than ever. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, but I ignored it, choosing to feed my mind instead. I believed that knowledge was food for my soul, and even if my body was weak, my spirit grew stronger with every lesson. There were many failures. I mispronounced words, forgot grammar rules, and felt embarrassed when people laughed. But I refused to stop. I told myself that mistakes were not the end, they were part of the journey. Every failure carried a lesson, and every lesson moved me closer to success. Sometimes, I used to imagine myself standing in front of a class, teaching English with confidence. That vision kept me alive. I could see myself smiling, speaking clearly, and inspiring others. Holding on to that dream was like holding on to a rope that pulled me out of the darkness whenever I felt lost. I created a routine. In the morning, I practiced speaking. In the afternoon, I tried to read whatever English I could find, signs, labels, old books. At night, I wrote down everything I learned. This rhythm gave me structure when life around me felt chaotic and broken. When I grew tired, I prayed for strength. I believed that God was watching my effort. I said to myself, if I keep going, He will open a door. My faith was the fuel that kept my engine alive when everything else seemed empty. There were moments when I almost fell asleep with a book on my chest. My eyes burned, my hands trembled, but I pushed forward. I reminded myself of all the people who said I could not do it. Their doubt was my motivation. I wanted to prove them wrong, but more than that, I wanted to prove myself right. I learned to celebrate small victories. When I understood a new word, I smiled. When I finished a page, I felt proud. These tiny wins were like drops of water in the desert. They did not quench all my thirst, but they gave me enough strength to keep walking. Many people thought I was wasting my time. They told me, English will never feed you. But deep inside, I believed that English would open doors I could not yet see. I trusted that every word I learned was a seed, and one day, those seeds would grow into a forest of opportunity. Even though my resources were small, my commitment was big. I sharpened pencils until they were too tiny to hold. I reused notebooks until every page was full. I carried pieces of paper in my pocket so I could study while walking. Everywhere I went, I carried English with me. There were times when the struggle made me cry. Tears fell onto my notes, blurring the ink. But I kept writing through the blur, refusing to stop. I told myself, tears are temporary, but knowledge will last forever. That thought gave me courage to keep turning the pages. My body grew tired, but my heart grew stronger. My hunger deepened, but my determination sharpened. Every difficulty became a test, and with each test, I grew tougher. Life was trying to break me, but I refused to bend. The road was long and lonely. No one clapped for me, no one said good job. But I realized I did not need applause. What I needed was progress, and progress was happening slowly but surely. That realization gave me peace, even in silence. Each challenge became a teacher. When I failed, I learned resilience. When I was mocked, I learned patience. When I lacked tools, I learned creativity. My struggle itself was an education, shaping not just my English, but my character. I often thought about my future students. I imagined their faces, their questions, their laughter. I pictured myself guiding them with the same passion I had for learning. That vision reminded me that my suffering had meaning. It was preparing me for a greater purpose. On some days, I felt like giving up completely. My body screamed for rest, and my mind drowned in doubt. But then I remembered my promise to myself: I would not stop until I could speak English fluently. That promise kept me moving forward, step by step. Faith was my anchor. Whenever I doubted, I whispered a prayer. Whenever I felt lost, I reminded myself, God's plan is bigger than my pain. That belief carried me through storms that might have destroyed me otherwise. I began to notice changes. Words that once confused me started to make sense. Sentences I once feared to speak now rolled off my tongue. The progress was slow, but it was real. For the first time, I felt the taste of success, and it gave me hope like nothing else. I realized that learning English was not only about language, it was about freedom. Freedom to express myself, to connect with others, to create a new future. That thought gave me wings even while my feet were still heavy with struggle. The fight was far from over, but I no longer felt powerless. Every new word was a weapon. Every new phrase was armor. I was preparing myself for a future battle, one that I was determined to win. My environment did not change, but I did. The streets were still poor, my stomach still empty, but inside me something new was growing. Strength, faith, and vision were shaping me into a different person. I realized that pain was temporary, but growth was permanent. Each sacrifice I made became a brick in the foundation of my future. Even when no one else could see it, I knew I was building something strong. The fight to learn was exhausting, but it was also beautiful. It taught me discipline, resilience, and faith. It showed me who I truly was when everything else was stripped away. And who I was becoming was stronger than I had ever imagined. I did not know how long it would take, but I believed that one day, the struggle would turn into strength. One day, the darkness would turn into light. One day, my broken path would lead to something greater. I whispered to myself every night, keep going. Don't stop. Your story is not finished yet. That whisper was my lifeline, pulling me through another day. And with each new dawn, I chose to fight again. My journey was not easy, but it was real. It was full of pain, but also full of hope. And deep in my heart, I knew that God's plan was unfolding, piece by piece, word by word. The fight to learn was shaping me for something bigger. I did not see it yet, but I trusted that the seeds of today's struggle would grow into tomorrow's success. And with that trust, I kept moving forward, no matter how hard the road became. Chapter 3: The Small Wins. For a long time, I felt like I was walking in the dark, but slowly, little sparks of light began to appear. One day, I understood a sentence I had been practicing for weeks, and it felt like a door opened inside me. My heart jumped with joy, and I realized that progress was real, even if it was small. Every new word I learned was like a victory. I started to keep a small notebook where I wrote down my achievements. The words inside were simple, but to me, they were like gold. Each page filled with notes was proof that I was moving forward, step by step. There were days when I could finally answer a simple question in English. It may have seemed small to others, but to me, it was a mountain I had climbed. I smiled at myself and whispered, "You are growing." These little victories gave me the strength to keep fighting. My confidence grew with every step. I began to believe that maybe I was not as powerless as I thought. Maybe I had the strength to reach the top of this mountain after all. The fire inside me grew brighter, and with each success, my dream felt a little closer. Sometimes I practiced speaking to myself in front of a mirror. The words were not perfect, but I loved hearing them come out of my mouth. I laughed at my mistakes but kept going. It felt like I was teaching myself to walk again, one step at a time. I began to notice the change in my mind. English words that once felt impossible now came naturally. Sentences that once scared me no longer made me afraid. I started to believe that English was not my enemy, it was becoming my friend. People around me started to notice my effort. Some of them who once doubted me began to ask questions. They were surprised by my progress, and slowly, their laughter turned into respect. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a failure, but as someone who could succeed. One of my proudest moments was when I helped a neighbor understand a simple English phrase. The smile on their face was brighter than the sun. I realized that the little knowledge I had was already powerful enough to help others. That moment gave me a new purpose. I kept going, adding more small victories to my journey. Every time I completed a page, every time I practiced pronunciation, every time I memorized a phrase, I felt stronger. These wins were like bricks, building a new house for my future. The joy of learning became bigger than the pain of struggle. Even when I was tired, the thought of another victory pushed me forward. I realized that progress is addictive. The more I won, the more I wanted to win again. Sometimes I thought about the first day I started. I remembered the fear, the hopelessness, and the hunger. Comparing that version of me to the new one, I could see a clear difference. I was no longer just surviving, I was growing, step by step. These small wins also changed the way I looked at failure. When I made mistakes, I no longer felt broken. Instead, I saw them as part of the process. Failure was not the opposite of success, it was the road toward it. I started to celebrate progress, not perfection. I realized that even if I was not fluent yet, I was far ahead of where I had started. That thought gave me peace. I did not need to be perfect today, I only needed to be better than yesterday. Every small victory built my confidence like layers of armor. I felt stronger, more prepared, and more hopeful. I knew bigger challenges were waiting, but I also knew I had already proven to myself that I could overcome them. I began to smile more often. My face, once filled with worry, started to shine with hope. Even in hardship, I found reasons to be grateful. The little wins reminded me that God was with me, guiding my steps, blessing my effort. As my English improved, I started to enjoy learning instead of fearing it. Words became music, sentences became stories, and practice became joy. The language that once felt impossible now felt like a friend walking beside me. I noticed that people started to listen differently when I spoke. My broken English still had mistakes, but it carried confidence. That confidence made others respect me more than perfect grammar ever could. The first time someone asked me for help with English, my heart swelled with pride. I was no longer just a learner, I was becoming a helper. That small moment changed the way I saw myself forever. I realized that knowledge was a gift, and sharing it made it even more valuable. Helping others learn gave me a happiness deeper than any victory of my own. It was proof that my struggle had a purpose beyond myself. My life, though still difficult, started to feel brighter. Hunger was still there, poverty was still real, but my spirit had grown too strong to be broken. The small wins gave me courage to believe in a better tomorrow. I often repeated to myself, every step counts. Even the smallest progress had meaning. Every new word was a seed, every practice a drop of water, and together they were creating a garden of hope inside me. With each small success, my faith grew stronger. I believed that God was rewarding my persistence. I began to see His hand in the victories, guiding me toward something greater. That belief gave me peace, even in the hardest times. I discovered that joy does not always come from big achievements. Sometimes it is hidden in the tiny steps, the little victories that only you notice. Those moments became my secret treasures, giving me strength to face each day. I started to trust myself more. The voice inside that once said, "You cannot do it," grew quieter. The new voice said, "Look at how far you've come." That voice became my companion, encouraging me whenever I felt tired. The small wins reminded me that success is built slowly. No one becomes great overnight. Step by step, word by word, day by day, that is how dreams are built. I accepted the slow pace, because I knew it was leading me in the right direction. I began to love the process as much as the dream. The journey itself became beautiful, filled with lessons and growth. I realized that the struggle was not just shaping my English, it was shaping my character, my patience, and my faith. Looking back, I saw how far I had come. The person who once cried in hopelessness was now smiling in progress. The person who once felt powerless was now growing stronger every day. Those small wins had created a new version of me. I held on to the belief that if small wins were possible, then big wins were waiting ahead. Every little success was a promise of a brighter future. And with that belief, I kept moving forward, ready for the next chapter of my story. Chapter 4: Becoming a Teacher. The day finally came when people started asking me to help them with English. At first, I was shy because I still felt like a student myself. But when I explained something and they understood, I realized that even my small knowledge had power. That realization changed everything inside me. Helping others gave me a sense of joy that I had never felt before. For years, I had been walking a lonely road, but now I was walking with others by my side. My struggle was no longer just about me, it was becoming a bridge to lift other people as well. I started with just one person, sitting together in a small corner, practicing words. My classroom was not a real classroom at all. Sometimes it was a park bench, sometimes a kitchen table. But those simple places became the foundation of something greater. As more people heard about me, they came too. Some wanted help with pronunciation, others with grammar. I shared everything I knew, no matter how little. Teaching forced me to study harder, because I wanted to give my students the best I could. My first students were patient with me, and I was patient with them. We laughed at mistakes and celebrated small victories together. The joy of learning was multiplied when it was shared. I realized that teaching was not only about language, it was about building confidence. Little by little, I began to see myself differently. I was no longer just a poor student with a dream. I was now a guide, a helper, a teacher in the making. That change in identity gave me confidence and a deeper sense of purpose. Soon, my tiny lessons grew into regular gatherings. People in my community respected me for the first time. They began to call me teacher, a word that once felt impossible to me. Hearing it for the first time filled my eyes with tears of gratitude. I worked hard to prepare lessons, even though I had no official materials. I created my own exercises, wrote my own examples, and shared my own story as motivation. My students didn't just learn English, they also learned resilience from my journey. Teaching became my passion. Every time a student understood something new, I felt proud. Their progress felt like my progress. Their success became my success. It was as if God had turned my pain into a tool to inspire others. Even though I had started with nothing, I now had something that money could not buy: respect. My students trusted me, believed in me, and looked up to me. That trust gave me strength to keep growing, both as a learner and as a teacher. As I taught, I kept learning. Teaching showed me my weaknesses, but it also revealed my strengths. It pushed me to improve every day, not just for myself, but for everyone who was counting on me. I began to dream bigger. What if I could open my own class one day? What if I could help many more people, not just a few? The idea excited me, and I started to plan quietly, saving every bit of energy and hope for that dream. People around me noticed the change. They no longer saw me as just someone struggling. They saw me as someone who was growing, someone who could lift others. Their respect gave me the courage to keep moving forward. I learned that teaching is not about having everything, it's about giving everything you have. My classroom was simple, my tools were few, but my heart was full. That was enough to light a spark in the lives of others. The laughter of my students became music to me. Their smiles gave me energy when I was tired. Their progress gave me joy when I felt down. I realized that teaching was not just my job, it was my calling. Slowly, I earned a little money from teaching. It was not much, but it was enough to buy food, books, and even save a little. For the first time, I felt like my dream was helping me survive in real life. With that money, I bought my first real notebook and a few pens. Holding them in my hands made me emotional. They were more than tools, they were symbols of how far I had come. From scraps of paper to real books, my journey was becoming real. My students began telling others about my lessons. Word spread, and soon more people wanted to join. I started to feel overwhelmed, but also deeply grateful. I saw that my dream was no longer just mine, it was becoming something bigger than me. I remembered the nights when I studied alone in the dark. Now, those nights felt worth it because they had brought me here. Every tear, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had been preparing me for this. I realized that teaching was a gift, not just for my students, but for myself. It gave me purpose, identity, and direction. It showed me that God's plan had been bigger than I imagined. There were still challenges, of course. I worried about making mistakes, about not knowing enough. But my students encouraged me, telling me they learned not just from my knowledge, but from my story. That gave me peace. As my classes grew, I became more disciplined. I made schedules, set goals, and worked harder than ever. I was building something real, something lasting, something that could change lives. Teaching gave me a reason to wake up with energy each day. Even when I was tired, I felt excited to see my students. Their hope fueled mine, and together we created a community of growth and resilience. I learned that teaching is not just about sharing information, it's about sharing life. My students trusted me with their struggles, and I encouraged them with my own story. That connection made our lessons powerful and real. The moment I first saw a student speak English with confidence, my heart swelled with pride. It was proof that my effort was bearing fruit. It was proof that my dream was not only possible but already alive. I began to see my dream unfolding before my eyes. From a hungry, hopeless student, I had become a respected teacher. From broken beginnings, I was now building a future filled with hope and possibility. Every time I stood in front of my students, I felt a deep gratitude. I knew I had not reached this place by luck, it was the result of persistence, faith, and God's grace. That realization humbled me and made me even more determined to keep going. Looking back, I could see how far I had come. The person who once borrowed torn pages was now creating lessons for others. The person who once cried alone was now surrounded by students who called him teacher. In those moments, I felt a deep truth in my heart: nothing is wasted. Every struggle, every tear, every sacrifice had led me here. My pain had become my purpose, and my journey had become my gift to others. I knew my story was still being written. There were bigger dreams waiting ahead, but I had already seen a miracle. From nothing, I had become something. From hopelessness, I had become a teacher. And with that, I felt ready for the next chapter of my life. Chapter 5: Opening My Own Classes. The dream of opening my own class started as a small thought in my heart. At first, it felt impossible, like a mountain too high to climb. But each day as I taught more people, the dream grew stronger. I knew it was the next step in my journey. I began to imagine a place where students could come together. A space filled with hope, learning, and encouragement. I wanted it to be more than just a classroom. I wanted it to be a home for dreams. At first, I had no money to rent a place. So, I started where I could. Sometimes it was in my small room. Sometimes in a neighbor's yard. The important thing was not the place, it was the passion to teach. People told me it was too difficult. Some said, "You cannot run a class. You don't have money. You don't have resources." But deep inside, I refused to give up. I remembered how many times I had heard "you cannot" before, and how I had proved them wrong. I saved every little coin I earned from teaching. Instead of buying unnecessary things, I put the money aside. It was slow and difficult, but every coin felt like a step closer to my dream. After many months, I had just enough to rent a very small space. It was not beautiful, but it was mine. Walking into that empty room for the first time brought tears to my eyes. It was the seed of something great. I cleaned the room, arranged old chairs, and decorated the walls with simple posters. I wanted my students to feel inspired when they entered. Even though it was humble, I treated it like a treasure. The first day of my own class was unforgettable. Only a few students came, but to me, it felt like 100. I stood in front of them, nervous but proud, and said, "Welcome to our new beginning." Teaching in my own class gave me a new level of confidence. I no longer felt like I was only surviving, I felt like I was building something bigger. This was not just my dream anymore. It was now a place where many dreams could grow. As weeks passed, more students joined. They told their friends, and slowly, the room was full. The sound of laughter, learning, and encouragement filled the air. My dream was alive, breathing, and growing. I worked day and night to prepare lessons. Sometimes I was exhausted, but when I saw my students' progress, the tiredness disappeared. Their success was my fuel, and their smiles were my reward. There were still challenges. Some months, I struggled to pay rent. Sometimes I worried if I could continue. But each time, I remembered why I had started. God had opened this door, and I believed He would help me keep it open. The community began to notice my work. Parents thanked me for helping their children. Adults who had once felt hopeless started to speak English with confidence. Seeing their transformation filled me with pride and gratitude. I started creating simple schedules and even gave out handwritten certificates. They were not fancy, but my students treasured them. For many, it was the first certificate they had ever received. My little class became more than a place to study English. It became a place of hope. Students came not only to learn language, but also to find encouragement and belonging. We became a family. I realized that my class was a reflection of my own journey. From nothing, I had built something with persistence and faith. Every wall, every chair, every lesson carried the story of resilience. Sometimes, I sat alone in the classroom after everyone left. I looked at the empty chairs and smiled. I remembered the days when I had no food, no money, no English. Now, I was standing in my own classroom, teaching others. It felt like a miracle. I learned that dreams don't happen overnight. They grow slowly, watered by effort and tears. My classroom was proof of that truth. It was small, but it was powerful because it was born out of struggle. The more I taught, the more I learned about leadership. I discovered how to guide, encourage, and lift others. Teaching was no longer just about English. It was about building people's belief in themselves. My students inspired me as much as I inspired them. Some came from poor families, some had many struggles, but they never gave up. Their courage reminded me of my own journey, and together we grew stronger. Every success story in my class became part of my story too. A student who could finally speak English confidently. Another who found a job using the skills we practiced. Their victories became my motivation. As my class grew, I dreamed of opening more classes in the future. I wanted to reach people who were just like me years ago, hungry for knowledge, desperate for change. That dream kept my fire alive. I knew the journey was not easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear. But when I remembered how far I had come, I knew I could keep going. God's plan had always been bigger than my imagination. The little classroom was more than just walls and chairs. It was a symbol of faith, persistence, and grace. It showed me that starting small was not a weakness, it was the beginning of greatness. Sometimes, I laugh thinking about how it all started with scraps of paper. Now, I had students, a classroom, and a growing future. It was almost unbelievable, yet it was real. I kept reminding my students, if I can do this, you can too. Never give up. Your dream may look small today, but it can grow bigger than you imagine. Their shining eyes told me they believed. Opening my own class was not the end of the journey, it was just the beginning. Each lesson, each student, each challenge was preparing me for the next step. The story was still unfolding. Looking back, I realized something powerful. I was once the student who cried alone, and now I was the teacher who built a place for others to grow. My pain had become my purpose, and my struggle had become my gift. This chapter of my life reminded me again that God truly had a bigger plan for me. What once looked impossible was now reality. And I knew that even greater things were waiting ahead. You have now heard my journey, from a life of poverty and silence to a life of teaching and hope. Every struggle, every late night, and every small step added up to something bigger than I could ever imagine. My dream was not just to learn English, but to change my life, and that dream came true. If you are struggling today, I want you to remember this: your story is not over. Do not listen to the voices that say you cannot succeed. Instead, listen to the voice that says you can rise, you can grow, and you can transform. God has a bigger plan for you too, just like He had for me. Thank you for watching this story on Easy English Official. If this video touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And never forget, keep learning, keep believing, and keep moving forward. Your future is waiting.